Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Ilana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this.
Welcome to this week's episode of the She Means Business podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Erica Malbon, the co-founder of Malbon Golf, a brand that's transforming the golf industry by blending fashion, culture, and sport. With a background in fashion and design, Erica has always had a keen eye for style and innovation. Before launching Malbon Golf, she honed her skills in the fashion world, working with top brands and developing a unique aesthetic that she would later bring to the golf industry. Her commitment to mentorship and leadership development is central to the brand's success and culture, and we're thrilled to have her here with us today. Welcome to the show, Erica.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. I've read all about you and your business and how exciting it is. You've certainly had some significant success. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your personal journey, your leadership journey, and how Malbon Golf came to be.
Of course. Well, I'm happy to share. I think that, my journey in business as a woman in business has definitely not been a more traditional path. And I think that that's sort of different than maybe a lot of the other people that you've had on the podcast. But a little bit of background, I grew up in LA. My mom is American. My dad was from the Philippines. I moved away with my family to Asia in the Philippines for 6 years, from when I was 8 to 14. And I feel like I've always sort of had a global perspective because of that, and an interest in like a lot of different elements of fashion, but also design and culture, and sort of like realizing how big the world is because of my experience of living abroad as a child. And then moving back to the United States when I was starting high school. I lived back in LA, but I'd always had I was always very curious and very interested in like what's happening around, and from a cultural standpoint, like what's happening from trends, from fashion, from just consumer behavior, and like finding things from a personal interest, and just always thinking about how that could be turned into something a little bit more than and just a passion or an interest. And then I went to college in Santa Barbara. And during my first year of college, I actually met my husband, who is 13 years older than me. And he had started his own business. And I felt like that was so interesting to me. And so I was in school, but I was really curious and ready to like kind of go out into the world. And so I started working and learning from him, and he was in advertising. And I was really intrigued by like taking certain concepts or products and figuring out how you target a specific demographic with what that is and what that messaging looks like. And so I really learned a lot organically from that experience. And so it wasn't so much, I got a degree and now I'm going to look for a job and I'm going to like go down this path. It was really very much like, okay, I'm ingrained in this, and I'm going to like absorb my surroundings and figure out what part of business is interesting to me. I always knew that I had like the drive to create and to be out there, but I didn't know exactly what that looked like. And then I really realized that I like taking things and packaging them and making them pretty and showing the world how things can kind of be rethought through. So my first business that I started was with a girlfriend, and it was called The Now, and it was a massage business, but that allowed accessibility in like a beautiful environment. So it was really about like democratizing the spa experience, and making it where it was more attainable and affordable, but also a really elevated experience. And so that was my first like business that I had started and raised capital for and put a business plan together, and it was really a learning and I think that was like really the first like school of business for me, where it was like actually in the real world figuring all these things out. And that was the stepping stone into Stephen and I starting Malbon Golf, because it gave me a lot of tools and learnings that I've been able to carry on and carry forward. And again, another passion project, something that I was passionate about, which was wellness and self-care, and turning that into a business. And then with the golf element, I grew up around golf. My dad was a big golfer. My husband, same sort of history. He grew up golfing. And we both felt that there was this need for a brand that spoke to a younger demographic, that made golf more approachable, more fun, more playful. And we started that in 2017 together. So it's been a journey, but here we are.
That's incredible. So of all the things, you talked a little bit about golf being an interest, but how did you land on that? Of all the things that you could do creatively, why golf and why golf apparel?
Yeah, well, I think that at the time, recognizing that there was a lot of other industries that had been disrupted in terms of like new categories. So whether that be like snowboarding or skateboarding or other sports that were really like looking at the intersection between fashion and sport and what that means. But in the golf space, with a sport like golf that's been so traditionally conservative or very, not inclusive and very exclusive and thoughtful, thought as a historical sport that has just been like categorized as very stuffy. There was this story to be told around like what golf can mean to somebody from a personal level. And like we both had these amazing positive experiences with golf, but like in our other interests, which were, fashion, art, like music, golf had this really bad reputation. And we said, why isn't, how do we change that? How do we make younger people think of golf in a different way? And apparel is a good vehicle for that, because everybody likes to feel good when they're playing a sport. And if they feel good and they look good, and there's other people talking about their outfits and they feel confident, then that's going to translate into a bigger movement. And I think that's what we saw with golf. So our original goal was just to inspire young people to participate in the sport. And then, the vehicle for that was really like, let's make amazing product and creative product that people feel really comfortable in and want to participate in because they love the way that they feel when they're wearing it. And so it's sort of like that was the vehicle for us spreading that messaging. And then it's really developed into like a community, a lifestyle brand, a golf brand. And so, it's gotten a lot of legs from there.
Well, it makes complete sense, because obviously if you want to attract younger people, it needs to be cool. And and what other way to demonstrate that it is cool than by the way that people are dressed. So that's really incredible. So you've built this business from the ground up. So tell us, what have been some of the lowlights and highlights of growing this business?
Yes, of course. The beginning of growing a business, well, one, it's a family business. So I think working with your spouse and being like all in, there's positives, but there's also challenges because you're just on business 24 hours a day. And, I think that's where like the passion comes from. And that's what really it does take to like see any business through to like the next stage when it is that difficult, is to like be like, well, there's no turning back from here. But there are a lot of challenges in the fact that, you can't ever just step away from your business when it is, your home is your business and your business is your home. And so I think, I personally am so grateful that we have this opportunity to work together and to start a business together and to be at this stage now. But, in the beginning, it was definitely a very difficult process, of starting a business and being so vulnerable with one from a business standpoint, but also from like, being in a marriage at the same time. And I think that now that the business has established itself further and we have our distinct roles and responsibilities, we really come into our flow. But that's definitely had its challenges.
How do you split the business between the two of you? What are you responsible for versus him?
Yeah, so Stephen is very much like in charge of a lot of the overall creative. I oversee the design for the women's collection now that we launched women's about 2 years ago. But Stephen is, from just overall, all overarching, like the creative ethos of the brand, and just really the spirit of like the characters that we create and the stories that we're telling, like those are very much coming from his experiences and communities. And then I've been involved with a lot of like the business decisions in terms of the, from the operations to the hiring to the finances. And so I sort of feel like I have like right brain, left brain, where I can, see the creative side and be very involved in creative. I oversee also like all of the design elements of all of our retail and our experiences. So I really enjoy that part. And Steven's very much, the creative, but we both wear a lot of different hats, but I'd say that he's more sort of on the creative elements of the business, and I'm overarching like, everything else basically.
So as a leader of this business, tell us a little bit about some of the maybe leadership lessons that you've learned over the course of your career and how they impact how you lead.
Definitely. Now that our team, like we just brought on 6 months ago, our first CEO who came from an apparel background, like a very extensive apparel background. And I think that something I've learned over the years, and something that I think is very important, is like when to know that, you are not necessarily the best person in this position moving forward. I think that like, I think it can be threatening, but I think that at the same time, you want to learn from other people that you have on your team and that you are bringing on, because like as a founder, I think you need to build a team around you that can support all of the areas that you don't have as much information or experience in. And I think that is so important and integral to success of a business in the long term, because you can get it to a certain point, but you have to know when you need to bring on other people to support the next stage of growth. And like every stage of a business is in, it's in a different need, and it's in a different, it has different requirements. And so I think just recognizing when that's coming and recognizing when it's time to move things around or change the way things have been is important, because it is hard, but that's how you continue to evolve.
I was just curious about how many people do you have on your team now at Malbon?
So there's just about 60 of us now, which is fun. It's been a really big growth year for us, and it's been 8 years now. So we've grown significantly year after year, and that just means bringing on more people.
And what have you learned about creating a culture and hiring in those people in terms of creating a workplace that you want to have, and a culture that you can be proud of?
For us, it's about like having a completely like creative, but also nurturing environment where people feel safe, people feel excited to come to work, and having a common goal, and really just being like all in together. And I think that because of the size of our business, we've been afforded the opportunity to just have like a one-on-one relationship with each of the people that we've brought on, and having a personal connection from like, every level of the business. I think like that's something that I don't want to lose as we continue to scale, is just really feeling like, everyone is here because they want to be here, and because they believe in the same vision as we have, and that they've been at other places, and they're bringing their best foot forward and coming to us and are excited to come to work.
I'm curious, you mentioned that you just brought on a CEO, and you just talked about how it's important to know when it's the right time to make that decision, and to know that your business needs that change. What was it that happened that made you say, okay, this is the time?
So Steve and I both, neither one of us had come from traditional apparel backgrounds, and like we didn't have the experience to know, oh, this is how merchandising and line planning, and this is like, we are entrepreneurs, we have vision, but the actual like processes, like that's just not our strong suit. And I think we both recognize that. And so I think that we, from a logical standpoint, have built the business to this point with like one foot in front of the other, logic, like, okay, you're still out of something, order more. Like planning and like the foresight and, the business of fashion isn't like, that's something that you learn over years of being in the trenches, and it wasn't something that we had. So we realized, like, when we started to think about, okay, growing out this business from, this X amount of revenue to this revenue and what that's going to take, we've realized, like, okay, if we want to get to that next level, like, we need someone to come in who's going to help us, who has that experience, who has been somewhere that has, had those kinds of revenue numbers, whereas like we haven't. So it's good to learn from somebody else's mistakes and then make our own. And that's why we decided that it was time to bring on like a veteran in the apparel space.
And so you've chosen golf, and we talked a little bit about that. And that's traditionally been a male-dominated sport. And I'm curious, what challenges have you had as a female leader in this industry? Or, have you encountered any roadblocks being a female founder in a more of a male-dominated industry?
I think that specifically in the golf space, and it is like still very much, run by men. I think women are the fastest growing segment in the sport, as, from a player standpoint, from a recreational standpoint. So that's really exciting. But I think that in general, like, one being a woman, and two being somebody who like isn't somebody who's been through, the years of the fashion industry. I think that there's definitely, when it comes to like financing, there's been people that have been really excited about it, but then there's also been people that sort of try to dismiss the conversation because they think they know better, or, they don't take you as seriously. And then you have to kind of like do an extra song and dance to like change that tune. I think that men, they say that golf stands for gentlemen only, ladies forbidden. Like, that's kind of like a joke of golf. And I think that like our mission statement in general for our brand has been to kind of break up that underlying misogynistic, like, underlying feeling that golf can be like, where it's only men, and it's not for women, it's not for people of color, it's not for different like socioeconomic groups. And I think that in general, like, our brand has sort of kind of scared people, and then the fact that it's also being run by a woman is also another added element. But I think that the fact that like we have such a strong understanding of what we're doing, and Steven and I are a team and work together, we kind of like look past that and we just keep foraging on.
What has been your biggest challenge personally in becoming the founder and the leader you are today?
I think for women, the work-life balance and prioritizing is always going to be something that's difficult. I think it's sort of integral to like who we are, and having a family, and then also wanting to have this like robust, life as a leader and a business owner and a founder. It's always going to conflict. And like in the beginning, I would sort of fight it, and then at some point you kind of just embrace it. And I think it took me a long time to get to that point, but I am kind of comfortable knowing that like, you can't be at two places at once, and that's okay. And you have to find balance and forgive yourself, and realize that like, you can have more than one priority, and you don't have to just be one or the other. You can be both. And sometimes you're not going to be able to give all to both, but it's okay. And you can't feel guilty to either one, whether that be your career or your family, and sort of forgive yourself. And I think that a lot of women have a hard time with that. But I think that's definitely been one of the biggest challenges, and knowing that I have passion for both, and I don't want to give one or the other up.
I think that's it. I think that's the real challenge. And, Ilana and I talk about this often. And I think for any woman who is struggling with this, that is the challenge, that you don't want to give either up. And so how do you do your best for both, and you knowing that you can't have it all and you can't do it all, but you can do your best for both. So I really love that. I'm curious what your plans are in the future. Like, where do you see this business going? Like, you've started and closed and started new businesses. What does the future look like for Malbon?
So, we are in a very exciting time right now. There's a lot of growth. One, in like the golf industry, two, in the apparel space, specifically in sports, and what, like I mentioned earlier, what sport and fashion look like together. Specifically for us, we are expanding heavily internationally right now. So I'm actually headed out to Asia next week, and we're opening a new flagship store in the Philippines, in Manila, and we're also opening several retail doors in China, as well as Vietnam. So we have a large growth, a lot of growth coming from Southeast Asia and China. So that's really exciting for us. Simultaneously building our U.S. business and continuing to roll out retail, continuing to roll out our new collections, our collaborations. And then, in the future, we see a lot of different opportunities with hospitality and experiences, specifically in the golf space. So, I think like we're really just getting started, and it's really a exciting time.
I want to make sure to give you an opportunity for a plug. So where can somebody find some of your incredible lifestyle and apparel brand?
So we launched, we have our brick and mortar retail. So we have stores in Los Angeles currently, New York City and Soho, Miami, Washington, D.C. and Georgetown, wow, Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm just talking U.S. And then Chicago, we opened a store just a few months ago. And then we're in the process of a few more retail locations. So we'll have 4 more that are opening in 2025. But Malbon Golf is where we launch all of our collections. And you can find us online at malbon.com.
That's incredible. Well, it sounds like the business is growing. You're seeing so much success. We're just so thrilled for you. And it's been such a pleasure having you on and learning about your story and your journey. And thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, and for what your messaging is, and for talking with women and having fun doing it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great to have you.
Well, that was great. She was so lovely. What a pleasure to meet her. And what an incredible business she and her husband have built. I think for me, what my big kind of takeaway was around this notion of to know that you're not the best person for the job, which I think that anybody can relate to that. You don't have to be a founder or an entrepreneur. And I think we talk about it a lot with entrepreneurs because they have to actually go and find the person who is better for the job. But I think that's totally applicable for anybody working in business, in an organization, on a team. I know we've talked about it as well in the past. And I think especially for people who are top performers, type A, want to get things done, want to, feel that they can do it all, there's this tendency of wanting to do it all. And there's this point of self-reflection and self-awareness to know when you're not actually the best person. And then to be able to put your ego aside and say, okay, I'm not the best person, reality check. But outsourcing what I can't do or what I'm just not the best at is okay. And that doesn't mean it doesn't make me bad or like a bad leader. It doesn't make me, it's okay. And it's actually for the better of the team.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, as she was talking about that, I mean, that really stood out to me as one of the things that from this conversation. And first of all, really impressive trajectory and really kind of understanding how to scope a market and find a niche that you can, where there's enough opportunity to grow. But I think on this point, I mean, yes, we hear about it from founders, but I was reflecting as she was talking into my career in more corporate environment. And I think there's a few things you can take away from a team building or a knowing when the time is. And there's a couple of scenarios I was thinking about. One is just building a team. And when you're building a team, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. We've talked about it. I don't think you can talk about it enough. They say you got to talk about something 7 times before it actually registers. I don't think this is something that we all have to remind ourselves about, is that when you're hiring for your weaknesses, it's not about, or your opportunities, it's not about your, bringing you down. It's actually about lifting you up. So that's one. The second is I've been in situations, and I'm sure many of our listeners have, where your job just gets too big. And I think what Erica was talking about here was, she wasn't like, they had gotten too big, and the skill set required to be bigger was not where her skill set was. And so they hired someone to be a little bit more processy. And I can think of 2 or 3 times in my career where I've helped my leaders see that I needed to divest of, or I needed to bring on, a more senior role, or I needed to understand kind of how to restructure around me and my role, to be able to allow me to scale the team I was on. And so I think there's a lot of application to that. And I think you hit on something really important, which was the self-reflection. If you don't allow yourself for time for self-reflection, and you don't really think about, where you are, what your team is, whether it's small, medium, or large, it's really, really hard to reflect on what you need to fill in for what you need. And I think that that's something that we just can take away from this conversation with Erica.
I really like your second point, because as I'm thinking about myself, and I'm sure this will happen to other people, is this idea of I can figure this out. There's a book like Everything is Figure Outable. Like I can figure this out, and that, while that is good in many ways, that can also stand in the way of outsourcing. Because I know I've had experiences where I'm like, okay, I have never done this. I don't know anybody who is doing this. I don't really know what to do, but I can figure this out. And so then I enter my, I will work harder, and I will learn faster, and I will just double down, rather than actually stepping back and saying, actually, I'm not, with all of my might and try my hardest, I'm not the best person for this. And so how do I outsource or partner with, or just hire somebody who can do this better without working quite as hard? And so I thought that was really interesting, because I think my instinct is to just figure it out.
I want to build on that very briefly, because I'm finding I'm currently working in a new kind of new area where it requires a lot of muscles that we haven't built before, or new projects. And one of my observations is exactly what you're talking about, which is this notion of when I don't know what I'm doing, if I just double down and I do it more, or I work harder, I can get there. And that knowing when you just need to partner. This is not about showing a weakness. This is about acknowledging where you are.
Exactly.
We've talked about showing a vulnerability to say, I may not know exactly what to do, and more brains would be better than less. And so that's a different type of filling in the gaps, right? It's not filling in the gaps of a permanent role in your life. It's filling in the gaps of something that you need to be able to help you be better. And so I really love that you hit on that. And I think for all of us, just reflect it, that self-reflection on what do I need at this time to allow me to achieve the outcomes is so critical.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of when you are growing in your career, that is a new muscle that you have to learn, because I think when you are starting out, you don't even have a team. There's no such thing as hiring
Correct.
Somebody to fill in. You are it, and so you need to figure it out. But to quote one of our previous guests, what got you here won't get you there. This idea of as you progress in your career, this is a new muscle. And so thank you, Erica, for bringing that to our attention and reminding us that
insight,
I think it's a great lesson. So thank you so much. And Ilana, that's a wrap.
I'm off to the golf course.
I'll meet you there.
Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.